Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and this is your horoscope for Aquarius rising for the entire year ahead for 2021. All right, so you can look at these horoscopes from the perspective of your sun sign if your sun is in Aquarius, or your moon sign if your moon is in Aquarius, but your rising or ascendant sign is preferred because that's going to be more unique and particular to you based on your birth chart and your actual birth time. All right, so let's first look at the planetary movements calendar, which shows where the planets will start at the beginning of the year and what signs of the zodiac they'll move through by the end of the year of 2021. So, the first major transit that I wanted to talk about, of course, that comes to mind for the entire year and is relevant for the entire year of 2021 is that Saturn and Jupiter have actually moved into Aquarius and therefore into your first house or into your rising sign. And that's actually the sign where they formed the Great Conjunction that occurred that was visible in the night sky in December of 2021, or December of 2020, I should say, was actually in your sign of Aquarius. So the energy of that conjunction is going to echo out for the entirety of 2021, and Saturn is going to be transiting through Aquarius for the next 3 years, whereas Jupiter is going to spend most of 2021 in Aquarius before it moves into Pisces in December of 2021 and departs from that sign. So Saturn into Aquarius and into your first house can bring some challenges or some obstacles or difficulties when it comes to matters pertaining to the first house topics such as your mind and your body. So it can be a much more serious time in which you become more serious and more reflective in some ways. There could be more focus on body issues and needing to address some issues that come up with respect to your physical or your mental health during this time as part of an ongoing long-term process. So for some of you, that can be just a little bit of a process of like aging and getting older and becoming more aware of your age and becoming more aware of the sort of effects of aging as you go on. That is thankfully going to be balanced out a little bit by the transit of Jupiter through Aquarius this year, which is a little bit more optimistic and a little bit about growth and expansion when it comes to both things regarding your mind as well as things regarding your body, and should help to balance out some of the physical issues if there's any health things that arise with the potential for being able to address them through direct action. So the good news, let's see. The good news is that this has ended a 3-year transit of Saturn through Capricorn and through your 12th house. And the 12th house can be an area of solitude, an area of dealing with areas of self-undoing, an area that has to do with those who work at cross purposes to you in terms of your life and having some obstacles and difficulties come up with respect to those people. People that you, let's say, don't get along with are traditional 12th house people, like traditionally in the text, they would say enemies, for example. So the good news is that that transit is over. Another transit that you're ending as we start the year of 2021 is Mars went retrograde through your third house of communication and siblings and your neighborhood. And starting in January, on January 6th, Mars is going to move into Taurus. So it's going to complete this 6-month transit of Mars through your third house. So this may have coincided with some challenges or strife or Mars-related issues with respect to communication in the second half of 2020. And the good news is that that basically gets alleviated and that transit comes to an end right at the beginning of the year in the first week of 2021. So that's definitely some good news. So with respect to the Saturn transit through Aquarius, which is a 3-year long transit that we're getting the first year of now, there actually should have been a preview or an opening phase of that occurred between late March and early July of 2020, when Saturn first dipped into Aquarius for just a few months in the second quarter of last year of 2020. So that's something that may have given you a bit of a preview of what this long-term Saturn transit is going to be about. That was probably a more difficult period with respect to either mental or physical issues because Mars would have been transiting through your first house at the same time in the second quarter of 2020. So I don't want to overplay that in terms of saying that the entire Saturn transit is going to be just as difficult over the next 3 years, but it may have brought up certain issues that you may still be working with or dealing with on an ongoing basis as Saturn moves through your first house over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. All right, so that's one of the major transits I wanted to touch on. Other transits that I wanted to mention for this year is Uranus, which is transiting through your fourth house in Taurus and has been since May of 2018 and May of 2019, will square Saturn exactly 3 times this year. So this is important because Uranus is transiting through the fourth house of your home, your living situation, your parents, your broader family in general, as well as your private life. And so there may be some sort of tension this year between some of the things that are indicated by the Saturn transit going through your first house of mind and body, and some tension that it brings up between your fourth house of your home and living situation and parents. So Uranus transits can be somewhat disruptive, somewhat unexpected, indicating unexpected changes with respect to the home and living situation or things with the parents. And somehow, or for some reason, there's a tension between that area of the fourth house in the home and living situation and the first house of mind and body over the course of this year. So the 3 exact hits that will occur where Saturn will square Uranus exactly first occur in mid-February from 7 degrees of Aquarius to Uranus at 7 degrees of Taurus. Then on June 14th, from Saturn at 13 degrees of Aquarius through Uranus at 13 degrees of Taurus. And then finally, the third and final hit will be on December 24th from 11 Aquarius to 11 Taurus. So those are the periods when that square will be at its peak. And especially for those of you who have fixed sign placements in your birth chart between 7 and 13 degrees, I would expect that those will be very sensitive degrees this year, where some of those tensions could really manifest or come to the forefront if you have placements there in your birth chart in those fixed signs. So that's going to be especially the case and maybe triggered by some of the Mars transits this year when Mars goes through the 3 fixed signs of Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio over the course of 2021, and especially when Mars makes exact hard aspects to Saturn and Uranus, first between January 13th and January 20th when Mars squares Saturn and conjoins Uranus. Then again, July 1st through the 3rd, when Mars opposes Saturn and squares Uranus. And then finally, again, the last time, November 10th through the 17th, when Mars squares Saturn and then opposes Uranus. So if there are tensions between those 2 areas of your life, of your first house of self and your fourth house of your home and living situation and private life, then those are periods where some of those tensions could erupt or become much more prominent so that they need to be addressed at that time in order to avoid it turning into a much larger issue. So I'd pay attention to those dates especially, and also just more in general, the dates when Mars will be transiting through the 3 fixed signs of Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio this year, as it may draw in some other topics related to relationships or career. All right, so other things I want to touch on are the eclipses, which are taking place in your 11th house of friends, your 5th house of children, and your 4th house of your home and living situation. So the first pair of eclipses is going to occur in May and June between Sagittarius and Gemini. So Sagittarius is your 11th house of friends, alliances, groups, as well as hopes and wishes for the future in general. So this could indicate some great beginnings and great endings when it comes to friends in your life, as well as groups and alliances in general. There's also going to be eclipses in your 5th house, and the 5th house signifies things like children, creative expression, as well as pleasure and sex and sexuality in general, or just the ways in which you have or experience pleasure in your life as a general topic. There should be some great beginnings as well as great endings in that area of your life. So these should not necessarily be new things per se, but instead it's a continuation of some themes that probably began last year in 2020 when that eclipse series started hitting those specific signs of Gemini and Sagittarius. So that could have gone back as early as June of 2020 when there was a very brief very small lunar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius, but definitely by late 2020, when there was a major lunar eclipse in Gemini and then a major solar eclipse in Sagittarius on December 14th. That was the full opening of that eclipse series, and you should have seen some major events start to develop in terms of your 11th house of friends and your 5th house of children and creativity during that time. And you'll see a continuation of that throughout most of the year of 2021. All right, so that's the first eclipse series, which occurs in Q2 of 2021. The second pair of eclipses occurs at the very end of the year. There is a Sagittarius solar eclipse on December 4th, which is the final eclipse in your 11th house of friends and groups, and it brings that eclipse series to an end. So whatever the sequence of events is in terms of great beginnings and great endings starts to get wrapped up by that time. But then there's also the opening of a new set of eclipses in a new pair of signs of Taurus and Scorpio that takes place with the lunar eclipse on November 19th in the sign of Taurus. So Taurus in your chart, as we talked about earlier, is your 4th house of your home and your living situation and your parents. And the opening of this eclipse series means that there's going to be even more attention that shifts towards and more of a spotlight that shifts towards your 4th house of your home and living situation and private life, as well as your relationship with your parents, starting at the very end of 2021. And this is actually going to open up a series of events that's going to, and a series of eclipses that's going to bounce back and forth between your 4th house of your home and private life and your 10th house of your career and your public life and overall life direction that's going to play out over the course of 2022. But I wanted to mention it here because many years from now, when you look back on this, you'll probably realize that that series of eclipses or series of events that started in late 2021 began with this eclipse, and then it turned into something much more significant over the course of 2022. But when you look back, you'll realize that it actually started here with this first eclipse in Taurus in 2021. So pay attention to that, as it will potentially snowball into a much bigger thing by early next year. All right, so those are the eclipses. There's only one other thing I meant to mention in terms of major transits in this overview of 2021, and that is the Jupiter ingress into your 2nd house when Jupiter goes into Pisces in late December. So here we can see Jupiter moving into Pisces on the 28th of December, where it's going to spend most of basically the following year of 2022. And normally I wouldn't mention this in a year ahead forecast for 2021 because it's something that really doesn't start until the very end of the year and pertains much more to next year's transits than this year's. However, if you look at the ephemeris and the planetary alignments I've got here for 2021, we can actually see that Jupiter just barely dips into Pisces for a couple of months, starting on May 13th. So Jupiter moves into Pisces on the 13th of May. Then it slows down and it stations retrograde in the 1st degrees of Pisces on June 20th, right there on the solstice when the sun moves into Cancer. And then Jupiter eventually retrogrades out back into Aquarius at the very end of July on the 28th. So what that means is that there's going to be this very brief 2-month preview of what Jupiter in Pisces is going to be all about for you. And I think that's going to be important to pay attention to because it's going to become a much more significant long-term theme that you're going to experience in 2022. So Pisces, for those of you with Aquarius rising, is your 2nd whole sign house. So the 2nd house is the place that pertains to money and finances and personal possessions. And Jupiter is, generally speaking, the planet of growth and expansion and optimism. So you could see a period of increased financial gain or positive developments in terms of your personal possessions and personal wealth during this time. It's something that's going to be much more significant in 2022, but pay attention to what happens between May and July in that specific area of your life, because if you see growth and expansion in the area of finances during that time, then that actually may be a nice preview of what's to come next year in 2022 when you have an entire year of Jupiter moving through that sign. So that's something to pay attention to and something to look forward to. All right, I think that's actually it in terms of the main transits that I wanted to highlight this year for your year ahead forecast for 2021. So good luck this year. Let me know how things go in the comment section below. And I will see you again maybe next year for the forecast for 2022. So good luck and take care. Many of the images and calendars that were used in this episode are now available as posters on the astrologypodcast.com website. This includes our 2021 planetary alignments calendar, which shows all of the ingresses and retrogrades and lunations this year, the planetary movements calendar, which shows how far through the signs of the zodiac each of the planets will get during the course of 2021, and also other posters that we have, like our significations of the 12 houses poster, so that you can personalize and understand how each of these transits relates to your own birth chart. We also recently released our 2021 Auspicious Elections Full Year Ahead Electional Astrology Report, where Lisa Scheim and I went through each of the next 12 months and we picked out one lucky date, which would be good for launching new ventures and undertakings using the principles of electional astrology. So you can find out more about that report at chrisbrennanastrologer.com. Thanks to all the patrons that supported the production of this episode of the podcast through our page on Patreon. In particular, thanks to the patrons on our producers tier, including Nate Craddock, Marin Altman, Thomas Miller, Catherine Conroy, Michelle Marilot, Christy Moe, Ariana Amor, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Sumo Kopic, and Nadia Habhab. For more information about how to become a patron or have your name listed in the credits, please visit patreon.com/astrologypodcast. Also, special thanks to our sponsors, including the Northwest Astrological Conference, which is happening online May 27th through the 31st, 2021. Find out more information at norwac.net. The Mountain Astrologer magazine, which you can find out more information about at mountainastrologer.com. The ISAR Astrology Conference, happening August 18th through the 22nd, 2021. More information at isar2020.org. The Honeycomb Collective Personal Astrological Almanacs, which you can find out more information about at honeycomb.co. Also, the Portland School of Astrology, more information at portlandastrology.org. The AstroGold Astrology app, available for both iPhone and Android, available at astrogold.io. And finally, the primary software program that we use on episodes of the Astrology Podcast is called SolarFire Astrology Software, which is available at alabe.com, and you can get a 15% discount with the promo code AP15.